The gavel struck the bench like a gunshot, but it wasn't enough to silence the storm brewing in the courtroom. Pam Bondi had faced ruthless prosecutors, slick defense attorneys, and corrupt politicians. But Judge Howard Gates was different. He didn't just challenge her. He undermined her, ridiculed her. And now as she stood before him, she could feel the entire courtroom watching, waiting, sensing that something wasn't right. The case was supposed to be simple, at least as simple as exposing a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme could be. A high-profile developer had been caught funneling government funds into his private projects, and the paper trail was damning. Bondi had built an airtight case, the kind that should have left the defense scrambling. But Judge Gates wasn't letting that happen. "Miss Bondi," Gates drawled, barely glancing up from the case file. "I assume you've brought something of substance today? Or are we about to waste the court's time?" A few chuckles rippled through the gallery. Bondi ignored them. She'd faced worse. "With all due respect, Your Honor, felony corruption charges are hardly a waste of time," she said evenly. Gates smirked, his expression dripping with condescension. "Right, because taxpayer money has never been used as an excuse for a frivolous case before." Bondi's grip tightened on the folder in her hands, but she didn't rise to the bait. That's what he wanted. For her to flinch, to stumble, to hesitate. Instead, she met his gaze, steady and unshaken. "Your Honor, I'd like to direct the court's attention to Exhibit A. These financial records clearly show—" Gates waved a hand, cutting her off. "Do you always drown people in paperwork, Miss Bondi? Or is this just your way of compensating?" The shift in the room was instant. The defense attorney smirked. The defendant leaned back, looking more comfortable than a man on trial should. The reporters in the gallery exchanged glances, scribbling faster. Bondi paused just long enough to make a statement without speaking. Then, she clasped her hands together and smiled. "Your Honor, if you'd prefer to continue making this personal, I'm happy to request a recess while we address any professional concerns you may have. A challenge, not aggressive, not disrespectful, but a warning." Gates' lips curled, amusement flickering across his face. "Oh, I don't have concerns, Miss Bondi. I just know a weak case when I see one." This time the murmurs in the gallery weren't amused. They were shocked. Bondi could feel the room shifting, the jury watching closely now. This wasn't just judicial toughness. This was personal. And suddenly Bondi knew. Judge Gates wasn't just playing a game, he had something to hide. She inhaled slowly, recalibrating. She had walked into this courtroom expecting resistance, but she hadn't expected a fight for the integrity of the entire judicial system. No matter, she had come prepared. "Your Honor, I'd like to proceed with the next piece of evidence." Gates tapped his fingers on the bench. A slow, deliberate motion. A dare. Bondi clicked the remote, switching the display on the projector. "This document, obtained through a subpoena, shows that the defendant received nearly triple the approved budget, with no record of where the excess funds went." She clicked again. "This ledger from the defendant's own company shows the actual transaction." Another click. "And this," she placed a final document under the projector, "is the approval signature." She let the weight of the moment hang before delivering the final blow. Signed by Judge Howard Gates. The reaction wasn't just a shift, it was a crack through the foundation of the courtroom. The defense attorney stiffened. The defendant's smugness evaporated. And for the first time, Judge Gates didn't look bored. His hands clenched, his mouth flattened, his face hardened into an unreadable mask. "That document," he said, voice tight, "is inadmissible." Bondi tilted her head. "On what grounds?" "It was mishandled." Bondi smiled. "That's interesting, Your Honor, because it was subpoenaed legally by my office." The silence that followed was suffocating. Every single person in the room had just witnessed something impossible to ignore. Bondi reached into her case and pulled out a small recorder. She pressed play. A voice filled the courtroom. "Take care of it. I don't care how. Make sure she doesn't get her hands on those ledgers." A stunned breath sucked the air from the room. No murmurs, no whispers, just the collective realization that Judge Howard Gates had just been caught. Gates' face turned pale. Ms. Bondi, I don't know where you obtained that recording, but the real question, Your Honor, she cut in, her voice calm, unshaken, is who were you talking to? Gates clenched his fists. This is outrageous. What's outrageous? Bondi countered. Is the abuse of power happening in this very courtroom? She reached for another document, sliding it across the table. This is a transcript of a wiretap, legally obtained. It corroborates the recording. You said, and I quote, Bondi doesn't have anything solid yet. If she does, I'll make sure it never sees the inside of a courtroom. A sharp inhale from someone in the gallery. Bondi turned to the bailiff. Officer Reynolds, would you kindly read the highlighted section aloud? The bailiff hesitated, then picked up the transcript. His voice was steady. We'll take care of her. A crack in the judge's armor, the first real sign of fear. Bondi stood slowly, adjusting her blazer. Your Honor, I wasn't asking for your permission. A single nod toward the back of the courtroom. The side door opened. Footsteps echoed. A firm voice rang out. Judge Howard Gates, you are under arrest. Gasps erupted. Reporters scrambled. The jury gaped. The once powerful judge sat frozen, his world crumbling in front of him. A uniformed officer flanked him. Another pulled out a set of cuffs. This is a disgrace, Gates muttered. The officer didn't blink. You have the right to remain silent. For the first time in his life, Judge Howard Gates actually was. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was deafening. Bondi remained seated, watching as years of unchecked power were stripped away in seconds. As they hauled him toward the exit, Charles Lawson, the man who had banked on Gates to save him, shot up from his chair. Wait, this is getting out of hand. We can work something out. Bondi turned, studying him. Work something out? Lawson swallowed. There's no need for this kind of public spectacle. Let's be reasonable. Bondi smiled. You seem nervous, Mr. Lawson. His mouth opened, but no words came. She tilted her head. Why would that be? Silence. Then finally a whisper. If I talk, I want protection. Bondi nodded slowly. Then you'd better start talking. And just like that, the most powerful man in the courtroom was gone. But this was only the beginning.